Most of us have used Craigslist at least once, at some point or another. Whether it be to buy something for cheap, or to sell something you're no longer using. I'm confident we have all heard of the horror stories that come from this seemingly innocent website. But what if the true horror starts long after the exchange, and not during? In tonight's video, I will be telling 6 stories. From stories involving Craigslist, the HOA, and zombie dogs. At least one of these stories are bound to freak you out. A huge thank you to the writers who allow me to share their stories. They are the ones who make these videos possible, and there are links where you can find more of their work in the description. Remember, you can send in your own story to rylhstories@gmail.com. If you enjoy the video, likes and comments are always appreciated. Subscribing if you're new is of course as well. Enjoy the video, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. Buying a car is probably one of the least fun activities out there. It ranks up with yard work and paying taxes. Dealing with the infamous Thai guy and his, "What can I do to get you in this car today?" boiler room sales pitch, and then being shuffled from one person to the next, all while hearing their various sales pitches of extra coverage options that you should really consider. Sounds about as fun as a colonoscopy. But after my latest experience with buying a car off Craigslist, I'd willingly spend an entire afternoon with Thai guy. Not wanting to deal with the used car dealership, I started my search on Craigslist. After scrolling through what seemed like several hundreds of listings, I saw one that caught my eye. 2005 Chevy Malibu. The listing read, 30,000 miles, interior like new, new tires, no accidents, slight wear on body but drives fine, $1,200 or best offer, willing to negotiate. $1,200? I thought, sounds too good to be true. On a whim, I decided to call the person and just check it out. If it turned out to be too good, I'd have to go back to digging through Craigslist, which I was not looking forward to. I called the number, and a man's voice answered on the other end. I told him that I saw his listing and was interested in checking out the car.
"Oh, great,"
he replied.
"It's my grandma's old car. She recently passed away and, well, she wasn't doing too much driving as she got older. Except to doctor's appointments, that is."
He laughed a little.
"I'm free this afternoon, if you'd like to come and see it."
Sure, I replied.
"Okay, great. I live on 50th and Washington, if that's not too far from you. My apartment is right next to the gas station. The name's Mark, by the way."
50th and Washington? I know exactly where that is. I'll see you this afternoon, I replied. Later that afternoon, I found myself getting off the city bus and walking the few blocks to Mark's apartment. I turned around the corner to his apartment complex and was greeted by a large gate and a sign that read, Desert Palms Luxury Condos, a private community. Wow, nice place, I thought. I called Mark and told him that I was there.
"Okay,"
he responded.
"I have to buzz you in. Hang on."
The gate let out a loud burr noise and rolled open. I walked in, found his apartment and knocked on his door. A well-dressed, middle-aged man opened the door. "Hi, you must be Al. Nice to meet you," he said, and gave me a firm handshake. "Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee?" he asked. Somewhat taken aback by his hospitality, I paused for a second and said, "Oh, no thank you, but I appreciate the offer. You just want to look at the car, right?" He laughed a little. "Well, I stammered, not wanting to be rude. "It's okay, I get it. God knows that I know what it's like to not have a car." He drifted off. "Anyway, let me get the keys, and I'll show you where it's parked." He led me to the car and I started looking at it. Sure enough, the tires were brand new. The interior looked good, and just like on the listing, there was external wear, but nothing that would give me pause. "You want to drive her around the block and see what you think?" he suggested, and held out the keys. I took the keys from him, started the car, and let him get in the passenger seat. I drove around and tested the AC. Yep, good and cold. Radio? Definitely a check, as Guns N' Roses' Welcome to the Jungle blasted from the speakers, startling me. Sorry, I forgot that I had it turned up that far. Mark grinned sheepishly. I laughed back. "No, it's okay. It's a good song," I said. I continued to drive the car around his apartment complex, and as we pulled back into the parking lot, he looked at me. "So what do you think?" I hesitated for a second. $1,200 you said, right? Yeah, but I'm willing to negotiate, he said, hopefully. I already had my mind made up. I can do $1,200. It just so happens that I got paid yesterday. I can go and get a check from the bank tomorrow, if that works for you. Sure, Mark replied. A few days later, I was the proud new owner of a 2005 Chevy Malibu. The car was great. It drove smooth, and I had almost forgotten what it was like to drive a car that didn't shake as soon as you took it over 45. One day, as I was getting into my car after work, I noticed a weird smell as I sat down. Huh, I thought to myself. Didn't notice that when I got it. I thought for a moment and realized that I did have to take my dog to the vet the other day. The poor mutt got stung by a bee. That plus the summer heat, and well, it was no wonder why my car smelled off. I made a note to get an air freshener. At first, the air freshener helped. I got into my car the next week and smelled tropical Hawaiian breeze, instead of dog in the summer. But as summer went on, and the temperature continued to rise, the smell got worse and worse. By this point, I could definitely tell it wasn't the smell of my dog. It almost smelled like I forgot to take the milk out of my car when I went to the grocery store. One day after work, I decided that I would have to find the source of that smell before it got even worse. I opened all the doors in my car and pulled all the seats all the way back. I looked in the glove compartment, under the hood, under the seats, nothing. As I walked around the back to the trunk, I noticed that the smell was stronger, much stronger. I could feel the bile rising in my throat as I almost vomited from how strong it was. Okay, it's the trunk, whatever it is. I opened the trunk. To my surprise, all that was in there was my tire patch kit, some empty grocery bags, and the jack for the car. Holding my breath, I took out the tire patch kit. I smelled it. Nope. The empty grocery bags? No. Nothing had spilled. I hadn't forgotten to take any groceries out. Where's the smell coming from? I stood in front of my car for a second, not quite sure what to do. Then I noticed something that I hadn't before. On the left-hand side, in the very back, nearly hidden by the spare tire, I saw something poking out. It looked like a plastic bag. Maybe I did forget to take some groceries out. That would certainly explain the smell. I reasoned to myself. I pulled on the bag. The heat had caused the bag to become flimsy, and I felt it tear. Damn it, I thought. My hand broke through and I felt something slimy and wet underneath. I tried to pull on it, but whatever it was stuck. I began to try and wiggle out whatever it was, and I immediately wished I hadn't. To my horror, I saw something looking back at me. Not an animal. No, that would have been better. It took a second for my brain to register what it was, and when I did, my blood ran cold. It was human. A half-decomposed human head was staring back at me. I screamed, slammed the trunk shut, and immediately vomited on the sidewalk. What the hell? Why is there a human head in my car? A million thoughts were running through my head. Did I just buy a car from a serial killer? Did he know that it was there? How long was it there? After I managed to compose myself enough, I called 911. At first, the cops didn't believe me. Apparently finding human heads in used cars isn't common. Who knew? The cops questioned me extensively. I showed them the Craigslist listing and gave them Mark's phone number and address. According to the cops, when they raided Mark's apartment, there was nothing there. The apartment was completely empty, but whoever was there had left in a hurry. When they checked Mark's mailbox, mixed in with the pile of junk mail, there was a note inside that read, "Mark, I hope you haven't sold that car yet. Ben told me that there's leftovers in there. You know how much he hates those. You have to be cleaner with this stuff. Call me. Jay." Today was the biggest shit show of my life. I just need to get out what I'm about to say, and didn't know where else I could recount what happened today. My name is Bridget, and I'm 23. I'm the youngest community manager in the office I work for. I try not to take myself too seriously, but I keep everything running smoothly for the community I manage. If you don't know what a community manager is, basically I meet with the board of directors, assist them in making decisions, and enforce the rules of the community. My two favorite nicknames are the HOA Police and the Weeds Nazi. In reality, I'm just trying to do my job. In my own small effort to keep the peace, I help the community come up with fun contests and awards for homeowners. This most recent contest was for free landscaping. It's the biggest issue in the community since I'm having to be the bad guy, and tell people they aren't maintaining their yards how they're supposed to, according to the rules. I have one big problem house, but he actually won the contest. His name is Mr. Wren. He seemed like a nice enough guy when he came to collect the award paper from the office. This is really just a novelty item. We essentially award the winner with a prepaid landscaping service for their front and backyard for 6 months, at no cost to them. Again, he was nice enough. Mr. Wren is a taller, typically disheveled man with unkempt hair but came well dressed, and wanted to take a photo with me shaking hands for their community website. Right after we took the picture, the mood shifted slightly. I could sense some lingering tension because of the yard issue. "Hey, so, do you think you can come take a look at the hedge in my backyard?" he asked me. "I want to make sure it's not going to be too much trouble for the guys doing the yard." "Sure thing, Mr. Wren. I can come take a look tomorrow morning when I'm out on the property," I told him. "It'll be between 8:30 and 9. Mr. Wren still seemed pleasant enough. The only thing is that everyone knows I don't typically enter a homeowner's backyard. We have measures in place for safety, and since he was the contest winner, I didn't think much of his request. I assumed he was happy and everything was water under the bridge. The next day I pulled up to Mr. Wren's house in my little silver sedan. He's on a corner lot, so I can include a map for you guys to check out if you want. His street is one of the least busy ones in the community, and his one-story house faces the very back of the neighborhood. He has a brick wall surrounding the backyard. The hedges he asked me to look at are at the very back corner, closest to the street on the left of his house, up against the wall. When I got out of my car to gather my laptop and purse and lock it up, he was already waiting just outside his front door. I know it's weird for a quick visit, but I never leave my personal belongings in my car, after it got broken into a few months ago. Mr. Wren looked slovenly in comparison to our meeting the day before. I thought that was probably because he just got out of bed. His hair looked about the same, but his clothes could only be described as greasy. "Ready to come out back and look at the hedge?" he asked. I smiled and nodded. "Definitely," as he opened the door for me to enter his house. I try to keep a really straight face when I'm in other people's spaces. The stench as I stepped inside, though. A wave of putrid odor from rotting meals and general filth assaulted my nose. In front of me was his kitchen table stacked with takeout containers, probably weeks old. Mr. Wren let out a small, awkward laugh. "Here, you can put your stuff on that chair there," he said. I nodded, still smiling, and put my laptop on the chair he pulled out from underneath the table. I thanked him, but definitely wasn't going to leave my purse behind. Mr. Wren motioned to a door to our left. It was just past the hell that was his kitchen counter and sink. Dishes on dishes on dishes. I tried not to gag as I entered what was his bedroom. So Mr. Wren was a hoarder, and I'm not judgmental, but the entire room smelled of urine and feces. Does he not have a bathroom? I thought to myself. When I looked to the left and realized that the bathroom was not in any condition to be used, I decided to keep my head down and eyes on my feet the rest of the way to avoid looking at anything. We got to the sliding glass door that led to the backyard, and Mr. Wren opened it up to fresh air. The yard was a mess of weeds, debris, and who knows what else inside the jungle of his lawn. We stayed on the porch, and he pointed to the back corner of the yard to a hedge that was surprisingly well groomed, in comparison to everything else. "Mr. Wren, what exactly are you wanting me to evaluate about the hedge? It honestly looks great," I said, trying to keep our meeting positive. "Yeah, you see, you send me all these letters and nasty grams about the state of my front yard," he said as he took a step closer to the hedge. "I just wanted you to see that I do keep my yard nice." He turned and stepped back toward me. He looked at me with what I can only describe as pure hatred in his eyes. "I'm tired of you bothering me. I'm sick of the fines. I don't give a shit who you are," he yelled aggressively. He moved toward me again with his finger pointed at my face. He exclaimed so vehemently that spittle was flying out of his mouth. At this point I completely froze. I've always been so calculated in stressful situations before, but I had no idea what to do. I suddenly realized that he probably only wanted to win the contest to set up this exact moment. Looking back, it was completely obvious, and I feel stupid now for making an exception to the safety protocol. Mr. Wren continued advancing on me, and started to reach behind him. I saw the briefest glint of silver, and broke out of my frozen state. Screw this, I thought. I'm not dying today. I leaped away from him and took 2 giant strides to the open sliding glass door. It almost looked like he was going to slash at me before I slammed the slider shut and locked it. I couldn't even smell the stench of his home anymore, now that I was focused on not dying. I frantically looked around for something to defend myself, and saw photos plastered around all of his bedroom walls. Pictures of me in the car doing my yard inspections. He must have taken a photo of me every time I drove by. The photo that disturbed me the most, though, was me unlocking my own front door. He must have been stalking me for a long time, probably when I started working for their community. I sprinted through the kitchen. Mr. Wren was slamming what sounded like his entire body into the sliding glass door and yelling obscenities. As I grabbed my laptop bag, the noise stopped. I wasn't going to wait to find out why. I yanked open his front door, and without bothering to close it behind me, ran down the sidewalk to my car. Just as I was getting to my car, I saw Mr. Wren out of the corner of my eye, hoisting himself over the brick wall. I scrambled through my purse for the car keys. Why of all days did I decide to wear something without pockets? He made it to the top of the wall glaring at me, and dropped down to the grass. I got my keys and pulled them out of my purse, along with a few receipts and trash. I'm definitely a hoarder when it comes to the state of my purse. I got the car unlocked, but Mr. Wren was getting way too close, and still yelling obscenities. As I opened the door and got in the driver's seat, my laptop bag got stuck. Mr. Wren reached out his hand to grab my door. I just dropped the bag and slammed my door shut, along with the lock. His fingers were only inches away from grasping on and pulling it open. Mr. Wren tried slamming my window, and got a few good gouges in the side with his knife. I ended up getting the car started and speeding away. I'm at my mom's house for now because he clearly knows where I live. I reported it to my work, and of course the police as well. Right now I can hear every little sound with a freakish intensity. Something loud just fell on the roof. I'm not sure if it was the wind, or some kids playing a prank. I don't think Mr. Wren knows where my mom lives. My great uncle owned a hunting camp in the forest. I never saw it when I was young, and I never saw a whole lot of him. He was, to hear the family tell it, a bit of an odd duck, and I think they were all a little creeped out by him. But he was closer to my mother than anyone else in the family, because she'd been an imaginative little kid, with the fantasy of living off the land, in the woods somewhere, and he'd take her on hunting and fishing trips to teach her all he knew. She told me a little bit about him, his obsession with hunting and independence. He'd grown up in a pretty terrible family situation, and his grandfather teaching him to hunt and forage had been the only thing that kept him and my grandmother from starving. My mother felt terribly sorry for him, and was the only family member who really made an effort to keep in touch with him. When he finally passed away a few months back, he left the camp property to her and his will. She almost felt too sentimental to sell it. But she'd long since abandoned her childhood fantasy of living in the forest. She's a suburban mom with a 9-to-5 job who complains when she has to miss a hairdresser appointment. I guess people change as they get older. Before she could start the process of selling, she had to go look over the property and clean out my great uncle's old stuff. She figured one of the regular attendees of his hunting camp might be interested in buying the place. I went with her because I didn't have anything better to do, and because she'd have a lot of stuff to move. My uncle, being the strange guy that he was, never bought himself a house, and chose to live in seclusion in the hunting camp year-round. He did have his fellow camp attendees when hunting season came around, and in the later years, he brought a much younger girlfriend to live there with him. There was a bit of family gossip when he did, but given how little they saw him, I don't think anyone ever commented on the age difference to his face. A lot of her stuff was still in their cabin, and I found myself poking through it, curious, as we searched through their stuff. Given how odd the whole situation was, it seemed weird how much of their stuff was super normal and human. They had a Keurig, for one thing, and he had several suits and ties hanging in his side of the closet. It was weird to see them, having never heard anything about him, but his fervent obsession with living off the land. But I guess he must have had an actual job, if he could afford to on all this property. Like I said, I never knew much about him. The thing that really piqued my curiosity was a sparkly pink journal I found on her side of their bed, while my mom sorted clothes. I guiltily began flipping through it. I'll admit it, I'm a snoop with a taste for some gossip. I knew I shouldn't have read her journal, but if it was really that private, I thought, she'd have taken it with her, right? So I opened it, and the first page was completely blank. The second page too. Every page was completely blank. But what kept me flipping through was that they all had little wrinkled spots. Like the book had gotten wet, but not by leaving it out in the rain or something like that. It was as if someone had been crying into the pages. Into each individual page, a scattering of teardrops. Weird. I was really just flipping at random when I caught a glimpse of a scrawl in the middle of a page near the end. I flipped back until I found it, and goosebumps raised on my arms, even in the sunny daylight. It comes for you in the night. The handwriting was small and round, and slightly shaky, and that one line with no context freaked me out so bad that after flipping to the end, I snapped the book shut and shoved it away from myself, and went to be close to my mom. I stopped snooping and redoubled my efforts to help her pack, eager to get out of that place. Later, we were driving away. I began to calm down, and the hair on my arms raised again. I thought of that journal, with its one line and all the pages with their little wrinkled drops. "Have your aunt and uncle been telling you stories?" she asked sharply. "No," I said quickly. I could tell she didn't believe me. "No one's told me anything, Mom." "Look, I've told them. I know he was a strange guy. He could be off-putting. If you didn't know him, I could understand why you'd think he'd kill those people. But he would never." "Killed what people?" There was a stone pit settling into my stomach. She paused for a moment. "This was many years ago, Anna, before you or your brother were even born. There was an incident at the camp. Several of the men went missing one night, and the rest of the hunters had to be interrogated for weeks. My brother and sister and even your grandmother kept spreading all kinds of gossip about him. Your grandmother, after everything he did to help her survive when they were kids." She paused. "Look, it's a weird story, and they were never found. We all found that unsettling, including him. He didn't reopen the camp for another 2 years, but most of his regulars went back, didn't they? They knew him. They knew he'd never hurt them. The police think it had something to do with drugs." "Why did they think that?" I had a vague feeling of dread, anticipating the answer before she spoke. For a couple of days before they went missing, these men were apparently rambling, paranoid and not making any sense, talking about something coming for them at night. I was frozen in my seat, but she kept going, oblivious to what was freaking me out so badly. Everyone's stories matched up to a T. The police think that these men came to the camp with some kind of hallucinogen, hoping to get high in the woods, and the trip went bad. They ran away together and ran into some kind of trouble, drugged out of their minds in the woods at night. I think it was weird, Anna, but I would never in a million years suspect Uncle Charlie of anything. I wouldn't have ever exposed you or Joshua to him if I believed for a second that he would do something like that. Do you understand? I forced myself to nod, staring out at the road, debating whether to tell her what I'd seen in the journal. For some reason, I couldn't bring myself to speak of it. I was just thinking of how secluded the campsite was, how helpless and alone you would be out there. But I also knew that my mother fervently believed in my uncle. She idolized and trusted him, and she did know him a lot better than I did. But Uncle Charlie's girlfriend hasn't turned up since he passed away in his bed. The relatives think she was only with him for his money, of which he apparently had an impressive sum, and that she probably grabbed whatever she could take when he passed. But even the police had been unable to track her down for questioning, and there's a dread in my chest that tells me they never will. A lot of her clothes were still in his closet when we cleaned out the cabin. Unless my tall, broad-shouldered great uncle had a penchant for cross-dressing in a woman's double extra small. And the other thing is, we haven't been able to sell the property. Not even to his hunting buddies. They won't touch the place. Once could be chalked up to a bad drug trip, they told us. But apparently, his girlfriend had been freaking out for a few days before she vanished from the campsite. They thought someone must have told her about the vanishing campers all those years ago, and it spooked her. These were a new batch of hunting enthusiasts, mind you. None of the original hunters had been on site at the time, having quit trekking out to the forest in their old age. Like I said, Uncle Charlie was rather weird in his hunting enthusiasm. Still, these young men must have heard the story, and thought it would be fun to tell it around the campfire. She was the type of girly girl profoundly unsuited for rustic life, and the tale would have scared her badly. Or so they thought. Until the morning she actually turned up missing without a trace. A handful of the guys seemed jittery and nervous, and had picked their shit to leave before the sun went down that night. Some of the hunting regulars who were closer with my uncle stayed, knowing that the sooner they got to her, the better the chance she had of being found alive. But within a few days, he was cold in his bed. They believe he died of grief, by their account, though they were quite the mismatched couple. They adored each other, and his heart just couldn't go on after she vanished. They described him as zombie-like, and deflated from the second they realized she was missing. Like he knew they wouldn't find her. And they haven't. They've combed the woods with dogs and rescue teams. They've reached out to her relatives to see if anyone knows where she went. They took note of the number of cars at the site, trying to find out if there's any way she could have snuck out of the camp without being seen. And they're even reaching out to the elderly gentlemen who were at the campsite when the original group went missing. They're coming up with nothing though. And we still have the property. Even once the investigation is cleared, I'm not sure we'll ever be able to sell it. I'm not sure that we ever should. I finally worked up the courage to tell my mom about the journal, asking if she still had it. And she put all of the girlfriend's stuff in bags, and took it to Goodwill before she knew the poor woman had gone missing. Which brings me to the reason I'm posting this. On the off chance anyone has found that journal. The police want to see it, and they're making efforts to track it down, but I'm not even sure that Goodwill kept it. They aren't sure, given the number of items they process each day. If any of you have found or purchased this journal, I'm desperate for answers. Please contact me. Every night I think of the dark secluded forest, and the line, "It comes for you in the night." Knowledge of the property weighs on me, and on my mother as well, and the weight never lifts. We have dread in our bones. Please, help us sleep again. The first time I noticed something was off was not long after I was fitted with a prosthetic eye. I'd been in a car accident about 7 months ago. I walked away from it obviously, but it messed up my face pretty badly. My right eye in particular. Anyway, the day that I got my eye started out pretty great. I was pretty psyched about not wearing an eye patch anymore. I didn't have to, but the sight of my empty eye socket had sent my little nephew into a crying fit. Made me feel like crap. And I'd been wearing one since. Not to sound too much like a complete cliche, but that day the sun had been shining, birds had been singing, I had been singing, cats had been running because I had been singing, but they're judgmental anyways, so who cares. It was only after the visit, on my way home, that things started to get a little odd. Close your eyes. Now move them around a bit. You know how you could feel them moving under your eyelid? That's what I felt the entire drive home, under my right eye. So yeah, when I got home I called my doctor right away. All the hell, man. After a bit of confusion on his part, he assured me that it was just my mind playing tricks on me, like phantom limb syndrome, but, you know, with my eye. This surprised the hell out of me because, until that day, I hadn't felt anything like that, which I was pretty quick to point out to the doctor. He didn't have any helpful answers beyond, to paraphrase, "The brain's a weird pile of meat, dude." Very helpful. The odd fluttering sensation continued off and on for several weeks. It was annoying as hell, but not actually painful, and after a while I got used to it. Even managed to forget it was even happening sometimes. Eventually, nearly a month after it first started, it actually stopped happening, and I thought that was the end of it. Yeah, that was not, in fact, the end of it. A few days after the fluttering stopped, I started noticing dark, blurry blobs, but only from what would have been my right field of vision. Understandably, this confused the hell out of me. And again I called my doctor to reiterate my earlier question with a, "Seriously, the hell, man?" Which he very unhelpfully answered with another, "For real, dude, the brain's a big, weird mess of meaty goodness." I mean, obviously he didn't say that, but it was a bunch of medical nonsense that explained fuck all. But that was what it boiled down to. Suffice to say, I was feeling pretty frustrated at that point, and a bit annoyed because those blurry blobs were everywhere I looked. A hell of a lot harder to ignore than the fluttering had been. Like, a lot harder. But I tried my best because apparently that was my life now. Weeks passed like that. Me trying my best first to ignore the blobs, and failing utterly. And then just trying to adjust to them being there. Better success. That was about when they started growing. Clearer. More distinct. Like, not all of this sudden, you know? But each day that passed they came more and more into focus. Like they had been objects that had been far away or something, and were finally just coming into focus. With each day that grew, I noticed more and more about them, and got steadily more freaked out. The blobs. Well, they were still blobs, but like, I don't know how to describe it. Okay, imagine for whatever reason you decided to go to a slaughterhouse, right? And you just gathered up all the meat and shit in there. All the organs, all the viscera. All the organs. Hell, even all the literal stuff, and bones and teeth and eyes. And then imagine you took all that, decided you wanted to apply it like a sculptor for Satan himself or something, and just smashed it all together into shapes that sort of resembled the end result. What would happen if a praying mantis and a squid met in a bar, got drunk as hell, and decided that the other looked kinda hot, and then draped it all over people who for some reason were cool with it? Yeah, that was probably the worst part. Those things, they were everywhere, on everyone, and no one noticed. I could see what looked like it was maybe part of a spine at one point. Maybe. Look, I'll be the first to admit I don't know much about anatomy, but it looked a lot like a spine. And when I went to visit my sister, it was wrapped around my nephew's throat, and it was... The end of it was tickling around at his little mouth, like it wanted inside him, and I couldn't let it. I couldn't. I didn't mean to scare him like I did. I didn't hurt him, I just grabbed him and I was screaming. I wasn't screaming at him, I was screaming at the thing on him, and I was grabbing at it, but I couldn't pull it off him. And I swear, I saw an eye form on that mass, and it looked so much like my eye, the eye I lost, and it winked at me. I knew I could see it, and it thought it was the funniest thing. I'm in the hospital now, a psych ward. My sister called the cops, and I guess I understand. Yeah. From her perspective, all she could see was me suddenly start screaming and grabbing at her son's neck. But she should know I never hurt that little boy. I was trying to protect him from that thing. I love him more than life itself. She told me she forgives me, but that she thinks I need help. So here I am, writing this out. I'm going to ask my brother to post this for me when he comes to visit. Hopefully he will. I just need someone to believe me. It's hard to say when it all started. My morning routine is pretty mundane, and I kind of just float on through it. Sitting down on my brown recliner that after years of use has conformed perfectly to my body, I would turn the TV on. I don't watch TV, so the channel never needs to be changed, so I just sip my coffee as the news plays in the background. The news acts as background noise, something to disturb the silence as I shuffle through social media on my phone. Occasionally, if a story catches my interest, I'll peek up from my phone and keep a vague eye on the TV. Just last week, I was going through the motions and heard a story about some local business that had protesters outside of it, something about unfair pay. The name of the place was familiar to me, so I momentarily peered at the screen. The camera was focused on the reporter going over the details, and behind him was a crowd of protesters by the streets. The news embellished it, making the group sound like a pact of people that filled up the block, but it was just a handful of people with hands full of signs. Cars were driving by and honking their horns. That's when one of the males tripped on the curb, and a car swept him off his feet. With the camera swiveling to keep the focus on the reporter, I could see the man's body ragdoll in the air, until it smacked against the pavement. The people continued chanting their mantra, and the reporter continued speaking on the issue. No one batted an eyelash. Even that car that had struck the man pulled away without bothering to check on the man. I would have just assumed my eyes had deceived me, but every time the camera would spin around just right, I could see his still body in the street. The camera lingered on the body for just long enough for me to observe his twisted corpse. The fabrics of his red flannel shirt and blue jeans were pulled in unnerving directions by his broken body. The reporter then signed off and gave it back to the newsroom. I thought that surely someone there must have heard or seen the man get him. There was no way that many people just didn't pay attention to it, or that no other nearby driver stopped. At the time, I convinced myself that perhaps someone was helping the man, that was off camera, or that paramedics had indeed been called. I shook it off and went about my day, although, as I shifted through my clothing, my hands drifted over my flannel shirt. It reminded me of the one the man was wearing, so I pulled it out of the closet, and on the sleeves were several tears in the fabric. It had to be a coincidence, I convinced myself. Before stuffing it back into the closet, I wore dress pants that day. The sun set on that day without incident, and before I knew it, soft golden rays were peeking through my window blinds to wake me up. I sat up and once again mindlessly paced through my apartment, and got ready as coffee was being prepared. My finger slipped around the cup's handle, and was carried over to the chair. There was always an hour for me to just sit and relax before work, so I sat down, pulled my phone out, and turned the TV on. It was then I learned that if a coincidence happens twice, then it isn't a coincidence. Almost immediately I was enthralled by the news. Some renegade idiot had thought it would be a fun idea to go on an early morning joyride with someone else's car and some drugs in the back seat. As the car tore down the highway with cops in hot pursuit, I watched through the camera of a pursuing helicopter. I couldn't pull my eyes away as the cars weaved around traffic and plunged through intersections. How more people weren't injured was beyond me, and I was thankful the traffic was so light that early in the morning. After about 20 minutes passed, the fleeing car lost traction on a turn and smacked into a nearby light pole, totaling the car. The cop cars pulled up to the criminal, and then guns were drawn and commands were given. I couldn't help but keep my attention on the man standing just in the frame. He was standing on a nearby home's rooftop, looking up at the helicopter. When the camera zoomed in on the scene unfolding, I got a better look at the guy. He was the spitting image of me, right down to the loose white t-shirts and Pokemon pajamas I was wearing. The wind ruffled his clothing as his bare feet slid closer and closer to the edge of the 2-story roof. I could feel myself lifting from the seat. I wasn't willingly doing it like I was having some out-of-body experience. Before I thought to reach for the remote, he slipped from the top of the house and fell to the ground, landing headfirst onto the cement. As he made an impact, and his neck snapped like it was made of toothpicks, I felt a sharp pain in my head. It was such an intense hot agony that I dropped from the chair and fell to the floor. Hot coffee slowly enveloped my feet as it spilled from my discarded cup. I couldn't breathe. I could only squirm around on the floor gasping for air. Then the criminal was detained and the broadcast ended. The pain dissipated from my body. Able to control myself again, I pressed myself up with my palms pressed against the ground and heaved several heavy breaths. Shortly after managing to compose myself, I called off work. I needed the day to myself. Calling off work turned out to be for the best. My employer called me and told me that someone had slipped something into the coffee at work. Something I happened to be allergic to. I was told they were looking into it, but that he wanted me and a few others to stay home for a while. He was worried it might have been something targeted at me due to the allergy. He didn't offer much detail beyond that, and I was, of course, curious. I dwelled on the circumstance of what happened earlier in the morning, and hearing about the incident at work until I couldn't keep myself away. My company was big, and if something like that happened, it would get out and the local news would be all over it. So I waited a few hours for the cycle to run its course, before anything new was introduced, and flicked the TV on again. My nerves convinced me to switch to a channel I don't normally watch, and sure enough, they were covering the incident. My employer must have permitted them to walk inside the offices. It looked like a ghost town. It was eerie to see the place I go to for 8 hours nearly every day of the week be so empty and silent. The same place that had a constant chorus of chattering and ringing phones. The camera panned through the cubicles, and every time I would show a clear shot of the aisles, I could see myself laying on the floor. The foam was bubbling from my lips. As the broadcast continued, I could feel my throat starting to well up, and before it went any farther, I lifted the remote and turned the TV off. I could see in the dark reflection that a small lump of light yellow foam was resting on the corner of my lips. I want to know more. Really, I do. The rest of the week I decided to stay away from any sort of live media. Even when I was linked articles from friends, I could see in the preview image for it that I was somewhere on the page, whether I was behind a group of people taking a photo op, or just standing alone in a scenic shot. I never clicked. Everyone wants answers to things they don't understand. I'm no exception to that. But every time I catch a glimpse of my doppelganger somewhere I'm not supposed to be, I can feel a heavy weight in my chest. It was naive to think I could just ignore the problem, that I could just pull the television plug from the wall and forget about it. I was supposed to return to work today, so 2 nights ago I decided that I would go out and try to enjoy myself after a stressful week. I went out to a bar, which is something I don't normally do. I wasn't paying attention as I slipped away, but the bartender had the local news station playing. The drink was getting to me, and my reactions weren't working as they should have, as my eyes pulled to the TV over the bar. I don't think anyone else saw it. No, how could anyone else had seen him standing in the frame? The report was just a fluff piece to fill the time slot. A report speaking outside a local sporting event about nonsense. He, or I, was standing right next to the reporter. I could see the details of the man clearer than I ever could before, most notably the smile that folded his cheeks, and his searing gaze. We were making eye contact through the screen. I was tipsy and wasn't thinking. All I felt was an overwhelming fear. I looked down and felt my breath leaving me as I noticed the red flannel shirt I was wearing. Between the small conversations in the bar and the people protesting outside the bar, something about how the business next door was underpaying their employees. There was a crash of anxiety. Looking back at the TV, I saw my copy lifting his arm, and with it came a handgun clutched in his fingers. I lifted from my seat in panic. Everyone in the bar reacted to my sudden movement, and the man next to me attempted to ask if I was okay. It felt like vines were squeezing my heart, and my head was becoming fuzzy. Faces in the bar started to blur, and when I looked at the screen, I could see the gun's hammer dropping nearly in slow motion. Panicked and unthinking, I back away from the bar and turned to exit. The man next to me tried to grab me, something about me being too drunk. I twisted free of his grip and stumbled to the door, not wanting to give my copy enough time to put a bullet in his head. Clumsily, I stumbled through the door and lost my footing. Passing by the group of people, I finally caught my foot in the street. The car's horn was the last thing I heard before I woke up here in the hospital. A layer of pain wraps my entire body, sitting just under the numerous casts that had been placed on the broken pieces of me, mainly my arms, which I landed on first. They told me I would be in here for a while and gave me my phone to keep myself busy. My phone's battery is dying and it's late. I've called for the nurse a few times, but the hospital remains pretty dark. I'm not worried about the phone though. I'm not even worried about the pain that is keeping me away. I'm worried about the neck brace that stops me from turning my head. I'm worried about my inability to reach the TV remote. I'm worried about the goddamn 24-hour news channel they left me with. When we lived in the city and it came time to put Muncher to sleep, Dad said we would have to leave the body at the vet's. I didn't want to abandon my dog, even if he was dead. Muncher looked so vulnerable, lying there with his tongue lolling, and his limbs splayed out like a puppet. He could almost be asleep, except for that his eyes were wide open. I was 9 years old when we brought Muncher to the vet. I guess my parents thought I could handle watching his life go out of my dog's eyeballs, like a dying candle flame. Watching his panting slow, then stop. If so, they were very wrong. I had nightmares about Muncher for years. Those slowed and stopped too. But the dark dreams restarted when it was Diva's turn to go off to the great kennel in the sky. By then, with my older siblings Brett and Sierra away at school, and with me leaving the nest for New York in a couple of months, my parents had downsized and moved into a quaint bungalow outside of a small town called Kearney. When you live out in the country, you don't leave your dog in a white room at the veterinarian's office for their corpse to add to the summit of a mass grave. You bury them out back on your own property. Most of the bumpkins substitute euthanasia for the business end of a shovel when it comes time for their dogs to pass. But Diva went quietly in the middle of the night, before we had even thought about how she would go. I loved Diva. She was a rescue. A beautiful Belgian sheepdog. We got her straight after Muncher, and she saw me through the toughest times of my life. She was there to comfort me when Brett and his friends tossed water balloons into my bedroom when I was asleep, ruining every book I had. She was there for me after my high school breakup, when I thought my heart might explode out of my chest like the creature in Alien, and for the second breakup, when I was sure that it did. Diva was there when Dad got cancer, and I'm positive she was the reason he ended up beating it. Cancer-free for 4 years and counting. It was like Diva absorbed the disease, lifted the maniac cells out of my father, and into her own body through sheer force of will. It was barely surprising when the tumors emerged under her skin, and less so when the disease killed her in less than 1 month. My whole family knew Diva would die for any one of us, and cancer had waited 4 deceptively calm years to take a life. It could not wait any longer. I buried her myself. Dad wanted to do it. I think more than that, he wanted me to have not to do it. But I told him it was fine. Mom didn't say a word when I left the house that morning with a shovel and a pine wood box, but I didn't expect her to. She had always been uncomfortable with the idea of death, never mind being within arm's reach of the thing. I took Diva's body into the forest out back. I didn't go too far in, and I think it was my first mistake. My parents bought a place right on the edge of town limits, and if I had gone maybe 20 or 30 steps farther in, maybe Diva would have stayed dead. The coffin I made for her was heavier than I expected it to be, and I felt that as soon as I was out of sight from my own bedroom window, I had gone too far. "Goodbye, girl," I said, staring down into the fresh hole. My hands were blistered from digging. You were a good dog. Thanks for everything. Thanks for saving Dad." I stopped, feeling I should say more, but the moment passed. Before I knew it, I was shoveling dirt back into the hole. I think maybe that was my second mistake. Not giving her a proper goodbye. She deserved one, but for the life of me I couldn't think of anything else to say. I picked a heavy rock to serve as a tombstone, and wrote out an inscription with a Sharpie I pulled from the house. The ink was supposed to be waterproof, but if it didn't last long, that was fine. The grave was for me. I know how weird that sounds, to be possessive over another creature's grave, but I was. "Here lies Diva," I wrote. "The best dog you could hope for. Take care of her, God. 2002 through 2011. It occurred to me that God is dog spelled backwards. A strange thought to have at any time. Even stranger knowing what happened afterwards. When I got to the edge of the forest, I spared one last glance over my shoulder to look at her stone. The message was still there, but the first drops of rain coming down made it look like either the stone or the message I had written on it was crying. "How'd it go?" My father asked when I joined him at the kitchen table. He had Fridays off. A strange thing for a car salesman, but my dad had the sales numbers to do pretty much whatever he wanted. "Fine," I said. "Did you cry?" I hadn't. I had not even considered crying until that moment. I'm not an emotionally guarded person by any stretch. Almost all of the guys on my own high school team were a hell of a lot tougher than I was. I told my father the truth. "That's alright," he said. My mom was at the kitchen sink pretending to wash dishes, but I could tell from the harsh way she was glaring into the faucet and the tight slash of her mouth that she was listening. "Don't feel bad, Ethan. She knows you loved her." Mom had spoken the words as if they were escaping from the end of a balloon. They rushed out all at once, flapping at a pitch 3 or 4 octaves too high. My father looked at the back of her head, trying to feel out if she was okay. Then he nodded at me. "I don't feel bad about it," I admitted. "I just didn't cry." "She knows you loved her," my mom repeated. "What are you going to do today?" my father asked. "I don't know." "Why don't you take Lila into town?" he said. "I think it's Fish Fest this weekend. I'll give you some cash and you can get her a hand-carved wooden necklace or something. I heard they sell all sorts of knickknacks." If I could sum up my father in just one sentence, it would be this. He is the sort of person who unironically uses the term knickknacks. "I don't want your money," I said, but I took the 20 when he handed it to me. After a brief text exchange, I drove over to Lila's. When her dad's farm disappeared behind us, Lily asked me about Diva, and how I was feeling about the whole thing. I told her that I appreciated the concern, but I didn't want to talk about it. I parked in the spot behind Rooster's pub so that Lila could use her employee parking pass, and we held hands as we walked through the town towards Victoria Park. She was telling me a story about the new girl at work, Caitlin or Katie, and how she was such a brown-nosing bitch. I nodded in all the right spots, managing a sharp exhale through my nose to pass for laughter, when she mentioned that the new girl was probably blowing the owner, but my thoughts were on Diva. One time, when she was just a puppy, she had been so happy to see my mom walking through the front door, her arms laden with grocery bags, that Diva had urinated straight into the carpet with the force of a pressure washer. I was thinking about the tired, half-angry, half-amused expression on my mom's face when we strolled under the waving Fish Fest banner. For most of the summer, the park had served as a place for teenagers to get together to smoke when the sun was up, and drink when it went down. Now though, colorful booths with local vendors and their customers lined the park. Farther along, the cooks and their grills were set up, dispensing deep-fried fish and french fries with genuine smiles. We passed straight by the jungled merchandises and collectibles, and straight towards lunch. The fish vendors were arranged along the perimeter of a semicircle stretch of grass. This area was crowded with tables and chairs, and there was a large plastic trophy painted gold displayed in the center. Whoever served the best dish, as voted by the attendees of Fish Fest, would have their name engraved into the trophy to join the elite club. It was the height of honor in Cairney to participate in Fish Fest, and a prestigious affair akin to winning the Stanley Cup to be the year's victor. Lila went to one of the booths and I went to a different one. "Thank you for choosing Harry's House of Halibut," said a teenage girl who might have been Harry's daughter or niece. "What can I get you?" "I don't care," I said. "My dog died today." Her smile faltered, and she shoved a plate into my arms and all but shooed me away after I paid her. I didn't care. I was thinking about how much Diva would have liked to chow down on the deep fried meat, and that she wouldn't have minded the newspaper appetizer that the fish was wrapped in. Lila offered me a bite of hers, and I took it into my mouth, chewed, and swallowed without much enthusiasm. I wasn't hungry. I offered her a bite of mine because it seemed like the right thing to do, and when she asked which I liked better, I said hers. They both tasted the same to me, gray mush. As miserable as I was, though, I could see that my girlfriend was making an effort to make me feel better, so I forced out a shallow smile that soared the edges of my mouth. "Do you want to check out some of the booths?" she asked. "Sure." "Did you see anything you wanted to look at?" "No," I said. "Did you?" "I saw one lady selling silver jewelry from Thailand. I think the proceeds go to an elephant sanctuary. Will you buy me something?" "Sure." She wasn't being selfish. We'd only been dating 7 months. But she knew me as well as my parents did. I liked buying her things. If she picked out something she liked and I paid for it, she would wear it every day. She led the way, pulling my hand through the crowd, much the same way that Diva would pull against her leash whenever I walked her. I ended up buying 2 silver rings from the sweet Thai lady with the elephants. Lila loved them both, and put one on her ring finger and one on her pinky finger. Careful to point out to me that you use the ring finger to the right hand for engagement. Or maybe it was the left. I can't remember. By the time the rings were paid for, and Lila was admiring them with her hand stretched out in front of her, the same way a crossing guard would tell a kid not to step out into the street, it was a little after 12:30. We checked out a few more booths without buying anything. My mood was improving, and by 1:30, I had parted through most of the dark gray morning clouds, and could see the sun on the other side. "Let's go to your place," I said. Lila had already met my parents, but I had other reasons for wanting to stay away. "Are you ready to go?" "Sure," she said. We walked towards the exit, but someone called out to us just before we stepped into the parking lot. "Hail to the young couple. Come see my wares before you go." The voice belonged to a man in his 40s, whose build reminded me of a thin-legged spider. He wore a ridiculous purple suit with a matching top hat, and he had a long twirling black mustache growing over a mouth that was half filled with gold teeth. He was a salesman, and the stall behind him was draped in a deep purple to match his outfit. "Heil?" Lila asked as we approached. "Forgive me, miss. Heil is an informal greeting of friendship where I'm from." He spoke in an accent that made forgive sound like forgive. "Where's that?" I was looking with detached interest at more silver and wooden jewelry. I had seen 100 pieces today already, each as forgettable as the last. "A place far, far from here," he said. I wasn't listening. I had asked to be polite and not waited to listen for an answer. That was my third mistake, not paying closer attention to the purple-clad salesman. 3 strikes, you're out. "What brings you to Cairney?" Lila asked. "Cairney has been on my radar for some time," the salesman said. "I have often heard that there are many people in this dear town with electric taste. It takes an electric taste to appreciate the value of my wares." "Well, it's nice to meet you. My name's Lila Price." She offered her hand a shake. "Felix Emmanuel Lamneck the Ninth," the salesman said. "Charmed, my dear." "Have you sold much?" I asked. I had at last found something unusual, a necklace with a black horsefly in a small bottle of preserving fluid for a pendant. I turned over the price tag on the fly necklace. $300. "Sadly not," Felix said. "It appears that good taste aside, the pockets of Cairney are not quite so deep as I had hoped." "Why is everything so expensive?" I turned over a couple more price tags. The cheapest item was the horsefly necklace. "Ethan," Lila said, sounding a little shocked. "That's rude." "I was just asking." "That's quite alright," the man called Felix said. I had turned to face him, and Felix's eyes were twinkling like the North Star. "Ethan, was it? My goods may look, perhaps, stranger, but of no greater quality than the garbage your neighbors are peddling. But I assure you my merchandise is in a different league." "Why is that?" Lila removed the new silver rings and slid them quietly into her pocket. "I'm afraid you'll have to buy one to find out," Felix said. He almost looked sad while he said it, as if regretting that we might spend money here. "I don't think my pockets are deep enough," I said. "Sorry." "That's quite alright," Felix said, and he smiled, showing off at least 8 or 9 gold teeth. "Thank you," Lila said as I led her back to the car. We went over to her place. Both of Lila's parents were at work, so we had the house to ourselves. Ordinarily, we would take the opportunity to screw, but my heart just wasn't in it. We made out for a while, but it became obvious that my heart wasn't in it. We held hands and I stared at the TV instead. The movie I Am Legend was on. And when it was over, I gave her a goodbye kiss and left. I can't remember what excuse I made. Maybe I told her the truth, that I just needed to be alone. The dog dies in that movie and it made me feel about as crummy as you'd expect. I didn't get much sleep that night, or the next. I expected to have some foul dreams about my dead dog, but to my surprise, she didn't visit my sleep once. It was Felix who kept showing up. In my dreams, Lila and I were back at Fish Fest. We wandered into his stand, and I went straight to the back to look at the goods he was selling. Instead of a fly necklace, my attention would be drawn by a different adornment. A ring made by 2 finger bones looped together, a silver bracelet with scorpion pincers jangling from one side, a plain-looking pair of wooden earrings that caused blisters to boil on my fingers when I touched them. Each time I would flip over the price tag, and instead of hundreds of dollars, the tag would read free. None of these items appealed to me, and I would leave with Lila the same way we did in real life, with Felix grinning his golden grin beneath his black mustache. When I would wake, staring at my alarm clock to discover I had only slept an hour. When sleep found me again, the cycle would restart. I had 3 or 4 of the same dream every night for a week, all versions identical except for the adornment which caught my eye. When I phoned Lila, ready to confess that I was cracking like an egg, she was crying. She told me that she was having the same dreams that I was, but with one difference. Last night, during her 3rd repetition of the dream, she gave in and took something from the booth. I asked her what she had bought, and she told me in her dream I had picked out a copper-colored necklace with a whistle on the end and draped it over her neck. And when I woke up, she said, her small cries morphing into heavy sobs, the necklace was under my pillow. The same one. It had a whistle and everything. "Don't touch it," I said. "Don't put it on. Don't even think about blowing on the whistle." But when she spoke next, crying harder than ever, I knew I was too late. "I blew it," she moaned. I don't know what came over me, but just looking at it, it felt like I had to. It felt like if I didn't blow the whistle, then he would come into my room and kill me. I don't need to ask her who he was. "What happened when you blew?" I breathed. Lila's crying stopped, and the line went silent. "Hello?" I asked, but there was no answer. I pulled the cell phone from my face to make sure the call was still connected. "Hello?" I tried again, a little louder. I was ready to end the call and drive straight over when she whispered a reply. "Nothing," she whispered. "It didn't even make a noise. I just blew and nothing happened. And then I realized what I was doing and how dangerous it might be. And I threw it in the garbage. But I think it's too late, Ethan. I shouldn't have blown the whistle, but I did. And now something awful is going to happen to me." I tried to comfort her. I told her I would drive over, that it was just a coincidence that we were having the same dream. Lila thought something awful was going to happen to her, and I was sure she was right. I got dressed and showered, but as I was stepping out of the door, I heard my mother. "Ethan?" she said. Her voice was wavering and hushed, like there was a burglar sticking his pistol into her ear and demanding she remain calm. "Are you okay, Mom?" "Diva's in the backyard." I ran back into the house, through to the kitchen to where my mother was standing. She was staring out of the window. Her skin was as white as milk. I was ready to tell her to relax, that whatever dog was in the backyard, it could not have been Diva, and if it didn't have rabies or something, we could see about getting in touch with its owner. I stopped cold when I looked out the window. My blood cemented in my veins. Diva was coming towards us, or at least, what was left of her. Most of her hair and skin had decayed or been eaten away by worms, and the remaining tatters of her were coated in dirt and scuttling insects. One of her eyes was gone, and a yellow mushroom sprouted from the socket. I could see most of her guts. One loop of intestine was dragging across the ground like a fleshy tail. She was moving towards the back door, was perhaps 10 feet away. I noticed a splinter of her pine wood coffin sticking up from between her toes. I sprinted to the back door and got the lock down on the screen door just before Diva jumped to paw at the handle. Her remaining eye had been dyed a dull red, and when she saw me, she snarled. She tried the door handle again, and when it didn't give, she backed off a few steps. She barked at me and hurled herself against the screen door. Her face crumpled into the mesh, then burst through. Hysterical barking filled the house, wild and furious. She was trying to force herself through the gap, twisting and gnashing her rotted teeth. She rammed the door frame again, and some of the wood splintered. I ran. "Mom, we gotta go," I said, dashing into the kitchen to grab her. Go? There was a crash at the back door. Some of the door, maybe all of it, had broken apart. "Go," I yelled. "Get in my car." I grabbed her shoulder and had to drag her through the house to the front door. "I have to get my wallet," she said, her mind having snapped at the sight of our snarling, decaying dog, and she tried to break out of my grip. There was another crash as the back door banged out of its hinges and hit the floor, and a quick, irregular scuttling across the wood. It was her claws. Diva was inside, maybe thrown off balance as she erupted into the house, but maybe not. She was barking again, and I managed to shove my mom to the front door as Diva came screaming into view. The mushroom in her face wiggled stupidly at me, but her lone eye burned, now as bright as the devil. I slammed the thick oak door between us. She barked again, smashed into the solid oak, and went silent. I heard her run away from the door, and knew she had not given up. She was going the long way to get at us, out the back door and around the house. Mom was standing on the porch staring at me. "Mom, the car." "Ethan," she said, "Diva's sick." I shoved her towards the car, too hard, and she almost toppled down the porch steps. Diva was still barking, had never stopped. She was outside already and rushing around the house, faster than she had ever been in life. "Move." I raced ahead, not to leave her behind, but to get the car unlocked and her door open ahead of her. Mom was coming a little faster now, but at a light trot and not the breakneck sprint she needed. I wondered how long it had been since my mom ran to or from anything. I was in the driver's seat. The car was rumbling, and the passenger door was open. All Mom had to do was climb in and shut the door. She was 5 or 6 steps away. Diva hurtled around the side of the house like a banshee, bearing gray teeth as sharp and serrated as kitchen knives. Mom didn't see Diva coming or couldn't bear to look. She took one shaking step into the car, and Diva was still on the other side. She was going to make it. She had maybe less than a second to spare, but she was going to make it. That was when Diva leapt clean over the car. At first, I didn't realize what had happened. Diva was there 1 second, a zombified monster, and in the next moment, she had disappeared from my car window. Then Mom was shrieking. Diva had pulled her out of the car. Then the screaming stopped. Diva was tearing at something wearing my mother's clothes, tearing it apart. I pulled the door closed and backed out of the driveway. I would have erupted into inconsolable tears if I looked back, or even took the time to think about the horror I was leaving behind. But I didn't. I put the gas pedal to the floor and drove. The drive to Lila's farm normally took 10 minutes, but I did it in 5, sending a huge cloud of gravel and dust along my trail. On the way, I passed an older woman in a yellow sundress screaming to high heaven. She was being pursued by the fleshless skeleton of a greyhound. It was moving without tendons or muscles to propel it, barking without lungs or a throat to funnel air. Before I could even think of stopping or slowing down, the skeleton had knocked her into the gravel and was pulling the lady apart. Blood splattered across the yellow dress and I turned to look away. A minute later I drove by a pack of medium-sized dogs in various states of decay. They saw me coming and chased the car for 30 seconds or so before giving up. One of them got distracted when it noticed a nearby farmhouse, and the pack broke off from me to chase a man who was driving a tractor and facing away from them. I rocketed the car across Lila's lawn without bothering with her driveway. Far off in her daddy's field, I saw 3 dogs ripping and tearing at someone in denim overalls. Blood was popping from the body, like a string of engorged zits. One of the dogs looked at me when I got out of the car, one with 3 legs and no lower jaw. It left its brothers and started a brisk lope towards the house. I sprinted across the yard and through the front door. "Lila?" I shouted. "Ethan?" She was upstairs. I took the steps 4 at a time. Lila was sitting on her bed. Tracks of tears were glistening on her cheeks. She had a good view of the field from her bedroom window, and I could guess why she was crying. "Ethan?" she said. "Did I do this?" "No," I said, but the copper necklace tinkled in clasped hands, and I knew I was lying. "One of them is coming," she said as I got her to her feet. "I know." They just came out of the ground, she said. They didn't even shake off the dirt. One of them is Jillian. She died 3 years ago, and I don't recognize the other dogs. What's going on? I don't know. They probably belong to the people who lived here before you, I said, or the people before them. How far do you think? How many dogs? All of them, I said, and she paled. All of them in Carenay at least. I got Lila into the car. She was scared, but she didn't freeze in terror like my mother, and by the time the rotted hound who had been named Jillian was bashing her skull against my car, I was already pulling out of the driveway. Where are we going? Lila asked. Coastal dealership, I said, thinking it was unlikely any dogs were buried in the center of town. I had to get my dad. Okay, Lila said, and rubbed her arm against her face to get the tears out of her eyes. I just realized I'm an orphan, she said. I reached over and squeezed her hand, not sure what else I could do. Lila's mother had died when she was 11 in a drunk driving accident, and her father was still back in the field, lunch for the undead. I brushed against the necklace she was still holding and jerked my hand away in surprise. The whistle was freezing, so cold it burned to touch. I rolled down my window, took the necklace from her, and threw it into dust. What if we needed that? She cried. What if we needed it to stop the dogs? That whistle brings them towards us, I said. There's only one person who can put an end to this, and we're going to deal with him after we pick up my dad. Felix? She asked, and I nodded. Carenay was in a worse state than I thought it would be. There was a half-decomposed German shepherd with no tail, working away at a fat woman in the McDonald's parking lot, and a whole pack of wiener dog skeletons chasing a middle-aged couple down the Main Street sidewalk. Gray storm clouds were gathering over the town. I had an idea they were there to blot out the sun. Another gift from Felix. Oh God, Lila breathed. I just hope there isn't one of those mass pet graves nearby, I said. She stared at me, expecting me to take back an ill-timed joke, but I didn't. I couldn't stop myself from picturing an army of undead canines marching into town, with Muncher's skeleton leading the vanguard. Oh God, Lila repeated. I pulled into the coastal dealership parking lot so fast that the brakes squealed, and the tires smoked when I stopped. The outside of the building had been almost all windows, so that people driving by could see the newest vehicles on display. But the glass was all smashed. There were 3 dogs inside, and each of them were chowing on a different victim. Not a single human face was recognizable, but a cold tingle running along my spine told me that if I thought about it hard enough, or stared a bit longer, I would recognize a pair of shoes, jumping as the owner was massacred, or the pattern of a blood-stained shirt. I could stay and wait for that to happen, or I could go. I kept driving. Ethan? Lila said as we turned back onto Main Street. Are you sure? I'm sure. Okay. She didn't say anything for another minute or so. Rooster's pub was burning in the middle of town, and more than one store had a howling zombified dog inside. Some of them were munching on a gored hunk of person meat, and those that weren't eating were stalking or chasing prey. I drove through a red light. There was a cop car right in front of us, but most of the driver was already inside of the distended stomach of a golden retriever. The retriever had a bright blue collar on, and its body was riddled with bullet holes, and it was also missing half of its skull. Where are we going? She asked. Where do you think he is? It's Saturday, I told her. We're going to the last day of Fish Fest. Victoria Park was lifeless. Various woodwork and metal craft was strewn across the grass like we had just missed a tornado running through. The Fish Fest banner was flapping pleasantly in the wind, but there were 1 or 2 extra splatters of red paint on it today. I pulled the car onto the grass, then turned to the sky. The engine died obediently, and Lila and I sat listening with the windows cracked. I woke them up, she whispered. I blew the copper dog whistle. I woke them from the dead. It's not your fault, I said, putting a hand on her leg. If you didn't pick the whistle, then you would have gotten something else. Or I would have. How were you supposed to know? It was just a dream. We both mulled over the last part, because we both knew it wasn't just a dream, as if the town burning around us wasn't evidence enough. Felix had done this to us. Carenay was being mauled to death because of him. I don't see anything. Let's get out, she said. Not yet. What are we waiting for? I opened my mouth to tell her I didn't know. A signal of some kind. When the wind picked up and howled, shrieking like a restless spirit with the force of a hurricane. Most of the vendor booths were a little more than canvas propped up by thin beams, and they were whisked out of Victoria Park, into the air, and gone forever. The stalls that were too heavy to blow away bulldozed flat by the tempest. A single stall remained, an unnamed canvas of purple to match its vendor's suit. Felix was there, waving us over. "Let's go," I said. Lila and I climbed out of the car. We moved together and clasped our hands without thinking about it. Most of the sun was scabbed over with clouds, and rising smoke from the fire sprouting all over town. But a stream of white light made it through the obstructions, illuminating Felix, as if he and his stall were Broadway stars under the spotlight. His gold teeth winked merrily at us. "I was beginning to think I wouldn't have any customers today," he called. "It seems Fish Fest is cancelled. I wish someone from the town council had notified me to save me the trouble of setting up my stand. Though from what I have seen today, I'm hardly surprised. I suspect the mayor is busy with other matters. Make it stop." I had to shout to hear myself over the wind. Dreadful. Just dreadful. Felix continued, as if I had not spoken. "Look around. Not a soul to be seen. Not even the fish peddlers could make it. I suppose today they are being served for lunch. I wonder who will taste best." Felix laughed, and it sounded like a poker raking over hot coals. Behind Felix's booth, plastic chairs and folding tables lay helter-skelter in the patch of grass. In the center of the clearing, the trophy lay blown over in the wind. It seemed to twinkle sadly at me, wondering where all the smiling faces had gone. "What did you do?" Lila shouted. We stopped 10 or so feet from Felix. He was no longer smiling. "What have I done?" he asked. "I have come a long way for you, Lila. I heard your dreams and wishes, and I made sure that no one else in your rotting, stinking town came to my booth. I wanted to make sure you got what you asked for. I put that whistle on layaway for you. I expected you to come thank me. You begged to have Ethan to yourself. You would give anything to keep him in Carenay with you. Isn't that right? You said it every day for weeks." I looked at Lila. She was shaking from head to toe, dogs barking a few streets away, and hoped they were not eating someone else I cared about. "This was your doing, girl. If you had just let the dogs eat you, and let me do it my way, the two of you would be together forever. You would have had eternity. If you did not want the dogs to eat you, then you should have picked something else from my selection." Something else? I suppose in a way that solved the mystery of the dreams. Whatever I might have picked, or whatever Lila might have picked, would have tried to kill both of us. I ran at Felix, to hurt him, to strike him with my fists or feet, or whatever I could hit him with. With the casual, jittering speed of lightning, Felix grabbed my collar and hoisted me into the air with a single gloved hand. "I'll have no more interruptions from you," he said, and heaved me into the air. I soared, shouting for Lila, and crashed into the earth. When I opened my eyes, the Fish Fest trophy was looking back at me. Felix had thrown me to the distance of half a football field. I turned my head. My neck creaked in protest. Strained but not broken. Felix was saying something to Lila, but they were too far, and the wind too strong for me to hear what. She was sobbing with her eyes shut, and he was walking to her, one hand outstretched. I didn't know what kind of deal Felix had made, more with himself than with her, but I could guess what he might be taking from her. When dogs climbed out of their graves, and mysterious salesmen struck satanic deals in your mind, of course it would be the immortal soul he was after. If Felix was not the devil himself, the two of them were at least in the same line of work. I climbed to my feet, and without thinking about what I was doing, I armed myself with the Fish Fest trophy. The second my fingers closed around the stem of the trophy, it began to glow. It was warm in my hands, and I turned it upside down, coming towards Felix with my two-handed club. The trophy seemed to be speaking to me through the warmth, and shining gold as I wielded it, through my hands and into my brain. It said that there was a force giving me power through the trophy, not God or anything so grandiose, but the good and white to oppose Felix's evil red and purple. The gold and good was equal to Felix at best, certainly not greater than him, and maybe a little weaker. The trophy was an object which people had, in their own way, poured their souls into. Hope, camaraderie, laughter, and other elements of good had been poured into the golden plastic ever since it had served as the emblem of Fish Fest. And that was why the white and gold force was able to use it to channel its powers through me. It told me that the good force would not last forever. I had perhaps one good strike before the power faded to nothing and we were done for. Felix spun as I grasped the trophy, sensing that I had found a weapon or that the weapon had found me. His eyes burned with black flames. He screamed and pointed a long pale finger at me. His fingernails were ink black and sharpened to razor-thin points. Nothing happened straight away, but the trophy throbbed forebodingly in my hands. Time was short. I accelerated my shambling walk towards Felix into a jog, and as I broke into a run, the ground beneath my feet shook like a mild earthquake. Something was coming. Undead dogs stampeded into Victoria Park towards us. They snapped and barked at us. Some of them were laughing at us too. Deep squawking laughter that came in crow-like bursts. Most of the zombies were nothing but skeletons, and it was easy to pick out the dog in the lead. Diva was tied to me by the bond we had when she was alive, and she had followed this bond, like a physical thread linking us together, into town. I guessed that she had been sprinting towards me since I drove away from the house. I ran at Felix, coaxing the last burst of speed from my aching legs. The light of the trophy was beginning to fade. It would be gone any second now. I swung at his head, but he stepped back and I missed him. Lila screamed behind me. I had swung too hard, and Felix took a step forward again, the trophy still swooping in its arc. Too heavy to pull back in time. He reached a hand at me, and I dropped my weapon. She caught it under my arm. Felix did not see her until it was too late, and he had already had one hand around my neck, and the other snarling my wrists, together like handcuffs. His hands were ice cold. He let go, hissing like a snake, stepping back again out of reach to avoid a second attack. But he was too slow. Lila's strike caught him under the chin, and Felix's neck snapped back. He screamed, one long cry of injustice and pain, and exploded into ashes and smoke. His last scream of fury lingered in the air, and was caught and carried off in the wind. I turned. Diva was there. She took another step towards me, leapt, and burst into dust, less than a foot from my face. The dogs behind her were gone too, one after the other, as if dissolved by an invisible ocean wave. In a moment they were all gone, blowing away in a wind that was already calming down. Then it was just Lila and I. She was covered in sweat, and I realized I was too. Sweat and dirt clung to my skin from when Felix had thrown me into the earth. She smiled and I smiled back. I went into her arms. She had dropped the trophy. The glow had faded out of it. It was just plastic. "Are you okay?" We both asked at the same time. "No." We both answered, and both laughed. "I think he's done for," I offered. "I don't," she replied, a shadow cast over her face. "I think he's gone for now, from Kierne, and maybe he won't ever come back, but he's somewhere. Creeps like him are never gone for good. Maybe we'll see him in our dreams," I joked, then wished I had kept my mouth shut. What if it was true? What if it was all we dreamed about ever again? Unending trips to Fish Fest to pick out cursed trinkets. But Lila was shaking her head. "No," she said. "I know that's not how it works." I grabbed her hand, squeezing it to tell her she didn't need to explain. I knew things too. Things I had no business knowing about the forces of good and evil. The trophy had given me the courage to attack Felix, and inspire Lila into action. Maybe it had given her the knowledge she needed after it was all done. "Did you really pray that I wouldn't leave?" I asked her. "I didn't know you were religious." "I'm not," she said, blushing, "but I felt like I had to try. I'm so sorry." "You couldn't have known." "No, not about this," she said. The hand not holding mine swept over the chaos around us. We passed under the Fish Fest banner again, and strolled into the parking lot, and she continued. "It was selfish of me to want to hold you back. I know you have to go away to school. I love you, Ethan." It was the first time either of us had said it. "I love you too," I said. Then in a burst of passion I added, "Come to New York with me." "Come with you?" she asked, climbing into my car. "Why not? The ownership of our parents' house will pass to us. I'll have to split the money with Brett and Sierra, but I'll make them sell. They won't argue. You could sell too, and we could get an apartment together and..." She put a hand to my lips. "Let's do it," she said. She kissed me. I kissed her back, and I drove. We let the town of Kierne burn around us, and didn't look back. "Let's get a cat,"